The headlines were just shocking. A city's school committee, effectively stripped of its fiscal authority by the state.
Right.
It seems like the sudden, just out of nowhere collapse, a financial lightning strike.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been going through this comprehensive Cushman report, and what we found is, well, it's far more disturbing. This wasn't a shock at all. It was a failure that was predicted and documented for 2 decades.
That's really the core of this whole deep dive. We're looking at the consequences of a nearly 20-year failure to adapt. The central problem, as the report puts it, is what they call the mismanagement tax.
A tax paid by you, the taxpayer.
Exactly. It's the financial fallout from this consistent inability of the school district to align its staffing, its buildings, with a student enrollment that was just steadily declining year after year.
So our mission today is to use this report to trace exactly how a manageable problem just spiraled into a complete fiscal meltdown. We're going to walk through the 3 distinct phases of governance the report lays out.
And we'll focus on the metrics that track it.
Right. And just to set the scene for you, between 2007 and 2025, the district lost 3,725 students.
Wow.
That is a 32.2% decline. A third of the student population just gone.
And to really quantify that damage, we're tracking 2 key metrics from the report. First, there's the annual alignment gap.
Okay.
So that's the difference between the drop in enrollment and the drop in staffing. If you get a negative gap, it means you're losing students faster than you're cutting staff. It's a huge structural red flag.
And from that gap, you get the second metric.
Yes, we translate that gap into a number of excess staffing positions. Basically, how many more people are on the payroll than you structurally need?
And we know what that costs.
We do. Cushman estimates an inflation-adjusted base cost of about $80,000 per year for just one of those excess positions.
Yeah.
And that is how we can calculate this cumulative mismanagement tax that just built up and up over 2 decades.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with phase 1, strategic alignment. This is from 2007 to 2013. And this era, it really stands alone. It's the only time the district showed any kind of structural discipline. Enrollment dropped significantly, 16.4%.
It was a big number in 6 years.
A very big number.
Yeah.
But what's really remarkable is that staffing tracked it almost perfectly. It fell by 14.4%.
What's so fascinating about phase 1 is that the leadership back then, they understood alignment was about more than just staff. It was about the physical buildings.
The footprint.
The footprint. They didn't just shed staff, they actually consolidated. They closed 3 schools, Potomac, then Rhodes in 2008, and John Green in 2010.
So they were right-sizing everything at the same time, the staff, the facilities. It sounds like a textbook case of how to handle this.
It was. And because they took those tough but proportional steps, the financial cost of excess staff was, pretty modest for that period, about $20.3 million.
And that was largely offset by savings from closing the schools.
Precisely. They basically achieved a temporary fiscal balance. It was a moment of real clarity.
So what broke that cycle? I mean, how did they lose that discipline going into phase 2?
The report really points to leadership turnover. Stability it waned.
Yeah.
And the discipline shifted from being strategic to just, reactive.
And that brings us to phase 2, reactive alignment, 2014 to 2019.
Right. The pressure from declining enrollment was still there, but the alignment efforts just stalled out.
But they couldn't ignore it completely. The sources show there was this 2015 SMMA Facilities Master Plan that laid out a whole roadmap for them.
It did, yeah. And to be fair, the school committee did follow part of that plan. They consolidated the secondary school.
Okay.
So they closed Gorton and Aldrich junior highs, and they converted Warwick Veterans Memorial High into a single middle school. And that was a necessary, important move.
But, and this is the critical failure of phase 2, they stopped short.
Yeah.
The SMMA report warned them they had massive excess capacity at the elementary level, over 26%.
Huge.
The report specifically said you need to reduce your elementary schools from 16 down to maybe 10 or 12.
Instead of that comprehensive fix, they tinkered. In 2018, they closed 2 elementary schools, John Wicks and Randall Holden, and turned John Brown Francis into an early learning center.
So some action, but it fell way short of what was needed.
Drastically short. They stabilized the secondary level, but they left the real core problem, the oversized, inefficient elementary system, completely unfixed.
So they basically fixed the loudest problem, but not the most pervasive one. What was the financial hit from that incomplete fix?
Well, the result was rising instability. The mismanagement tax kept growing. The excess staff cost for phase 2 rose to $26.6 million.
And the only reason they didn't collapse then was what?
Financial smoke and mirrors. They started relying on one-time fixes, like redirecting a pension surplus to pay for day-to-day operating costs.
So paying the monthly bills with yesterday's savings.
Exactly, instead of fixing the broken structure.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because Phase 3, structural decoupling from 2020 to 2025, this is where the whole thing finally collapses.
This is the crisis point.
We see enrollment continuing to drop, another 947 students gone. That's an 11% decline in just 5 years.
And this is the catastrophic failure point in the report.
Yeah.
While enrollment dropped by almost 11%, staffing increased by 24 full-time positions.
Wait, increased?
Increased. A 2.2% increase in staff to serve 10% fewer students.
Staffing went up in the face of a 10% enrollment drop. I mean, what was the rationale for hiring 24 more people?
Well, the rationale was often framed around new mandates or, maintaining robust services. But the data from Cushman is clear. The alignment gap fell firmly into the red zone every single year.
And by 2025?
By 2025, that gap hit a catastrophic negative 15.5%. Just think about what that means. It's like trying to run a 6-cylinder engine on a 2-cylinder chassis. The system is just fundamentally broken at that point.
And because of that, the number of excess staff it must have exploded.
It absolutely did. The number of unnecessary positions ballooned from just 28 at the end of Phase 2 up to a staggering 191 excess full-time employees in 2025.
191.
It's a 6-fold increase in the workforce for students who just are not there.
So let's talk about the bill for that. The cumulative excess staff cost for just Phase 3, that 5-year period, hit approximately $80.7 million.
$80.7 million.
That one figure is the largest single reason the total mismanagement tax hit $127.6 million over the whole 18 years.
And this failure was made so much worse by the use of federal COVID relief funds, the ESSER money.
Right. They got over $19.1 million in that one-time relief money between 2020 and 2024. A huge, unexpected inheritance. What did they do with it?
Instead of using it for one-time fixes, technology, HVAC repairs, they used it to pay their permanent bills. They used temporary money to pay for permanent staff members.
So they used it to make the misalignment worse.
Yes. Former Superintendent Thornton actually issued a critical warning at the time. He said the district was overutilizing ESSER to maintain overstaffed positions. He saw it coming.
That's the definition of a structural trap. If ESSER money is an inheritance, they didn't invest it. They used it to pay their mortgage for a couple of years, knowing they couldn't afford the house anymore.
And when those temporary funds expired, the crisis that had been masked just blew up into a full-blown 9-figure deficit.
The avoidability of it all is maybe the most painful part of the report. The analysis shows that if the district had just maintained the alignment gap they had back in 2020, they would have saved $29.2 million between 2021 and 2025.
It proves this wasn't a revenue crisis. It was a spending crisis. A choice to spend almost $30 million more than was structurally necessary.
And this decoupling, it wasn't just staffing. The building footprint was completely mismanaged. By the 2024-25 school year, elementary schools were just cavernous. Scott Elementary was at 50.4% capacity.
Basically half empty.
Half empty. And what's truly shocking is the governance vacuum. The school building committee, the group whose job it is to manage facilities, they failed to even discuss consolidation once between 2019 and 2025.
Not once. Even as the demographic warning signs were just blaring.
They weren't just ignoring it, they were actively investing against it. This is a deliberate mistake. During Phase 3, the district spent over $16 million in bond funds renovating severely underutilized schools like Cedar Hill and Lippett.
Pouring millions into reinforcing a footprint that all the projections showed was totally unsustainable. If you're renovating a building that's half empty, you either close it or you consolidate other students into it. They didn't either.
They just reconstructed the shell of a district that didn't exist anymore.
And then this governance failure was compounded by just internal political paralysis. During the most critical contract talks for 2024 to 2027, the committee leadership couldn't even participate.
Why not?
Nepotism rules. Chairman Galligan and the previous Chairman Testa were both legally prohibited from being at the table. So the negotiating chairs were essentially empty.
So who did the negotiating?
It was outsourced to attorneys and mediators. They secured labor peace, sure, but they had no political mandate to demand the structural cuts that were needed.
And the result was a contract the district couldn't afford.
Exactly. An $8.2 million increase in new costs, committing the system to a level of spending it simply had no revenue for.
So what does this all mean when you put it together? The crisis, fundamentally, was one of structural misalignment. It was not underfunding.
Not at all. It's easy to read the headlines and think this is an impoverished district, but the Cushman report just proves that's not true. City and state funding actually increased by $44.2 million in Phase 3.
The problem was the refusal to resize the system.
That's it. Enrollment declined 32.2% over 18 years, but staffing only dropped by 20.9%. That failure is why per-pupil costs soared to nearly $25,000.
$24,883, to be exact.
Yeah, which is 25% higher than a sister district like Cranston. And that 25% difference, that's the mismanagement tax quantified. It means you, the taxpayer, are paying thousands extra per student just to maintain inefficiency.
And now the bill is finally coming due. The district is overextended, oversized, and facing a $350 million bond for 2 new high schools that's arriving on what the report calls the city's maxed-out credit card.
This crisis is just the inevitable collision of all these deferred decisions. They were warned in Phase 2 to consolidate elementary schools. They were warned in Phase 3 about ISR. They've simply run out of one-time tricks to hide the structural problem.
And the fact that they failed to consolidate when schools were half empty but are now pushing a $350 million high school building plan, it means they are essentially building massive new parts for a system that fundamentally doesn't exist anymore. So for you, the listener, the real question this all raises is, how much more expensive is it to try and rebuild a district that is so structurally overextended, refusing to close old buildings while you build shiny new ones, than it would have been to just build the right-sized district in the first place? That difference. That is the financial burden, the mismanagement tax the community now pays for 2 decades of deferred action.